Developers taking care with moving their classics onto new systems is all well and good, but sometimes it pays to take a second look at the product. After all, you can sell a second copy of a game to the hungriest of fans, we're surely all guilty of buying a game twice. Whilst there are plenty of examples of bad ports that flopped on arrival, there are also many that actually succeeded in adding something to that original game. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 best versions of iconic video games you didn't play. Number 10. Devil May Cry 3 Nintendo Switch. Devil May Cry 3, released for PS2 in 2005, can be credited somewhat with saving the franchise after the failure of DMC2. Thus, it has seen a good number of re-releases over the last 15 years, most recently appearing on the Nintendo Switch store. The downside to the Switch ports of the Devil May Cry games is that they'll set you back more than the 2018 HD collection on PS4, as you'll be buying each game separately. That being said, this new release of Devil May Cry 3 specifically adds in some new features that may make it the definitive release. The most exciting of all is the tweak to the main game, bringing a feature from DMC4 and 5 retrospectively back into Dante's Awakening. Previously, players would have to select what fighting style they'd like to use before each stage: Gunslinger, Swordmaster, Royal Guard or Trickster. Now, with a simple push of the B button, you can swap style on the fly, offering a greater depth of opportunities and inviting you to try them all to your heart's content. The Switch port also features a new local cooperative multiplayer mode to the Bloody Palace side game 2, meaning that you and a friend can team up as Dante and Virgil together and share in the joy that is stylishly executing waves of demons. Number 9. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, PSP and PlayStation 4. Symphony of the Night is the game that revitalised the Castlevania franchise when it launched for PlayStation in 1997 and helped to craft an entire genre of explorative action games. The title received a port a year later to the Sega Saturn, albeit exclusively in Japan. Because the console was less powerful, it is technically speaking inferior to the original, but does feature unique areas, bosses, and even the ability to play the whole game as Richter's love interest, Maria Renard. Weirdly, Symphony was one of 2 unlockable games in the PSP title Castlevania The Dracula X Chronicles. This iteration was then dragged and dropped onto the PS4 as part of the Castlevania Requiem collection, and this may well be the best version. Bringing all of the Saturn content to the West allows us to enjoy Symphony of the Night to its fullest extent, as all 3 characters, with as much of the map as possible, and it even includes items cut from the PS1 original. There is one minor negative though. Whilst the game does include a script that is closer to what was intended, it therefore means all the beloved cheesiness of the original PS1 release is no more. As sad as it is that the game doesn't include Dracula demanding to know what a man is, the gameplay additions are a much greater boon than this is a blemish. Number 8. Okami Nintendo Wii. With perhaps one of the most unique aesthetics in video game history, Okami takes inspiration from Japanese artistry to tell the tale of Amaterasu and her magical paintbrush. Used in combat and puzzle solving, it was a refreshing take on the Legend of Zelda formula that had inspired it. When it was released for PlayStation 2, Okami's paintbrush wielding gameplay caused a near unanimous reaction of "this is awesome, but we can think of a couple systems that it would work even better on." With the touchscreen of the DS or the motion controls of the Wii, Okami was sure to succeed. Capcom heard the response loud and clear. A few years later, Okami made the jump to the Nintendo Wii. This port didn't add any new content. In fact, it quite controversially dropped the original ending credits scene due to the inclusion of Clover Studios' logo. Clover had developed the game originally and shut their doors immediately afterwards. Also, some poor intern on the graphic design team accidentally left IGN's watermark on the North American box art, so that's a thing. As for the game itself, people asked and Capcom listened. Players new and old delighted in swinging the celestial brush through the power of the Wiimote. Number 7. Metroid Prime Trilogy, Nintendo Wii. For the last 15 years, the first-person shooter has dominated the industry and has evolved into a state where just about anyone can pick one up and understand how to play it immediately. Not that Metroid Prime is an FPS, but it does share some commonality with them, and going back to the GameCube to play it feels very confusing and outdated. Instead of using the twin-stick formula that has become the norm, Samus moves exclusively with the left joystick and looks around using the triggers. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption was forced to change tact when the series came to the Wii, and we're all the better off for it, as the motion control aiming was infinitely more understandable and certainly more rewarding. Clearly, Nintendo thought so too, as they immediately put Retro Studios to work on getting all 3 titles in a line and putting them on a single Wii disc as Metroid Prime Trilogy. Prime and Prime 2 Echoes had their control schemes updated, and it made the series a much more seamless experience. Additionally, all games received Corruption's credit concept, where in-game points can be swapped for concept art and cosmetics. However, as great as the package is, it's quite hard to find these days. With the release of Metroid Prime 4 presumably on its way, we can only hope this version gets ported forwards to Nintendo Switch. Number 6. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Game Boy Advance. Generally respected as one of the greatest 2D adventure games of all time, it's no wonder that the Legend of Zelda fans were begging for Nintendo to port A Link to the Past over to the Game Boy Advance. When they did so, it arrived in 2004 with the unwieldy title of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and 4 Swords. The cartridge was one hell of a 2-for-1 deal. Whichever you bought it for, you were getting a bargain. Want a portable version of Link to the Past? Here's a free multiplayer adventure. Want a Zelda game you can play with your friends? Here's an updated classic for free. A Link to the Past remains mostly intact, save for a few exploits patched out and a few nifty additions, such as being able to save and load the game anywhere rather than specific locations. Also, for some reason, Link now yells and screams using his voice clips from Ocarina of Time, which is something you'll either love or hate. As for the 4 Swords adventure, it had that level of Nintendo quality you'd come to expect. Cooperatively solving puzzles with friends in the Zelda universe for the first time was a revelation, and probably something that Nintendo needs to do more with, considering how good 4 Swords and its sequels have been. Number 5. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, Microsoft Xbox. The 2021 release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 was that nostalgia grab that we all needed after the series, putting it lightly, lost its way. This remake combined the tracks, skaters, music and gameplay of the first 2 games in the series for now aged wannabe digital status to nourish themselves on, but it wasn't actually the first time these 2 titles have been packaged into a single game. Released only for the original Xbox and only in North America, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X is like a harbinger of what was to come 20 years later. In order to give Xbox owners what they had perhaps missed out on if they didn't own a PlayStation, and to bolster the console's launch lineup, Neversoft put together this director's cut of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Running at a solid and steady 60 FPS, Pro Skater 2X's campaign takes you through Pro Skater 2's courses, some brand new maps, and then back to where it all began with the original game's parks. This gives it the fullest single-player experience of the series to that point, not to mention improvements from Pro Skater 3, which launched just 1 month prior. The new maps might range in quality, but new content is always welcome. Despite being a series that was born on the PlayStation, the definitive edition of Pro Skater 2 lives on the Xbox. Number 4. Chrono Trigger, Nintendo DS. Original Chrono Trigger composer Yasunori Mitsuda spoke for us all when he exclaimed "finally" regarding the announcement of a new port of the JRPG classic. Despite being a fan favourite of many, it remains one of Square Enix's most underrepresented properties. In Europe, Square and RPG fans in general lost their minds. It was the first time the game was getting an official release outside of Japan and North America. It would have been enough just to port the game over and keep it simple, but the DS version of Chrono Trigger reworks a lot of the PlayStation's additional content and adds plenty of its own. New dungeons open up near the late game to give experienced players more challenge for greater rewards, and there's even a post-game dungeon and new final boss which ties the story closer to its pseudo-sequel Chrono Cross. Still not enough? Why not try the exclusive Arena of the Ages area that allows you to train and battle your own monsters? This side game alone is enough to sink tens of hours into. Throw in an optional new control scheme and clever usage of the top screen for the game's map and menu, and this is without a doubt the cleanest and most rewarding Chrono Trigger experience to date. Number 3. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, iOS and Android. When Sonic the Hedgehog 2 arrived, it made video game sales history, breaking records and becoming the best-selling game of 1992 by some sizable distance. As such, in the 30 years since its release, the game has seen numerous ports and inclusions in both Sonic and Mega Drive collections. Unbelievably, the best version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is locked on mobile devices. Built from the ground up by die-hard Blue Blur fans, this port features native widescreen, smooth frame rate, and leaderboards for those that want to test their speedrunning skills. There is no expense spared, and the love for the original shines through. The Sonic and Knuckles lock-on mode, Knuckles the Echidna in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, is accounted for, and better yet, the port even replaces the infamous Death Pit in Mystic Cave Zone with a brand new level. The Hidden Palace Zone that was cut from 1992's development was finally real. Development lead Christian Whitehead followed up his round of Sonic iOS and Android ports by fulfilling a dream and crafting a brand new adventure called Sonic Mania. Since Sonic Origins and its latest re-release of this title is being handled internally at Sega, it's unlikely that it will be quite the same as the iOS and Android version made by fans for fans. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker HD, Nintendo Wii U. When it was first revealed to the public, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker was controversial. Some fans adored the cutesy art style, whilst others rejected it and saw it as the wrong direction for the franchise. Despite this, critical praise for the game was high, and in the ensuing years it has gone on to become a treasured entry in the series. As Nintendo geared up to work on Breath of the Wild, experimenting with the Wii U took the form of porting over existing entries to the system. Wind Waker HD took reportedly 6 months to develop, and whilst it remains fairly faithful to the original game, the quality of life improvements are a thing of joy. Like the 3DS ports of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, Nintendo did their best to alleviate the clunkiness and menu navigation by dropping the game's inventory onto the console's second screen. In order to speed things up in general, Link can now play a song that makes travelling the Great Sea much swifter, and the dreaded late-game Triforce quest, which brought many gamers to the end of their patience, has been hugely improved. Wind Waker's cel-shaded art style may have turned some off at first, but those that love it see it as timeless. With a fresh lick of HD paint, the game has never looked prettier than on the Wii U. Number 1. Final Fantasy XII: The Zodiac Age, Sony PlayStation 4. Final Fantasy XII did some really interesting things with the expected formula as Square Enix began to dip their toe into experimentation in the series. The title was fairly well received, although some criticisms were levelled against its gameplay. The license board system that was meant for players to upgrade characters in ways that they chose was ultimately a shallow experience. Japan received an updated version of the title in 2007 called International Zodiac Job System, which quite ironically did not release internationally. Adding widescreen display, the ability to control guest party members, and 12 license boards rather than the standard game's 1, fans of the title outside of Japan were drooling at the prospect. A whole decade later, in the summer of 2017, Final Fantasy XII: The Zodiac Age came to PlayStation 4 with all of the above and a bunch of technical improvements to boot, including a new soundtrack. Finally, Western fans could have a greater degree of control over the game's job system and craft their characters more specifically rather than have them all become jacks of all trades. This version was so definitive that it won several awards and continues to be ported forwards to Nintendo Switch and Steam. Whilst many gamers love to go back and hook up their old PS2s to play a few classics, this is one game where the re-release's massive overhaul has certainly made the original redundant. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and any other underrated versions of classic video games that you can think of. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.